Full Contact. In association with Mitsubishi Motors, drive your ambition.
Hello and welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph and Mitsubishi Motors. The quarterfinals of this year's Rugby World Cup are starting to take shape, and those involved are now focusing their attention on trying to achieve either top spot or runners-up. England overcame their first Tier 1 test with ease on Saturday morning when they thrashed Argentina. Mind you, Argentina were down to 14 men, but that's their own fault, frankly. They've got a spot in the quarters, which means they've gone one better than last time in their home World Cup, and World Cup winner Mike Tindall will be joining us on to reflect on the win for Eddie Jones' side. Next up for England, it's France, who themselves have qualified for the next round with a narrow win over Tonga. The former French coach and player Philippe Szentendre will speak to us about which French side he thinks will show up, and also about a rift. Could it be that they've fallen out again, just like the Dutch football team they are, aren't they? A rift between playing and coaching staff. All up for grabs in Pool A. Japan, Scotland and Ireland, they're fighting it out for 2 quarter-final spots. Later on, I'll be going through the permutations, and let me tell you, it takes some getting used to. So when we get to that spot, listen carefully. Scotland, well, it's quite simple. They need maximum points from the last 2 games to stand any chance of progressing. We'll be speaking to their former fullback Hugo Southwell about how they're shaping up heading into both games. But I'm delighted to say that once again I'm joined in the studio by the former Springbok captain and World Cup winner Bob Skinstad. Hello, Bob.
How are you going, Ron?
I'm okay, mate. Look, last time we spoke, I think it was before the tournament. We're now getting to the end of the pool phases. What have you made of the competition in general so far?
Look, I think divided in two. One, there's what's happened on the field, and there's what's happened off the field. I think off the field, the fans, the country, everybody in world rugby has said this is one of the best ever. You know, it's just, you can see these amazing images all over the web of people singing songs and going bananas all around Japan. That's been brilliant and well handled, and well done to World Rugby and the hosts. On the field, I think we've seen some really good performances. We've seen, the All Blacks at their sublime best most recently, but against Namibia, hard to judge if that's what we can see going forward. And then we've seen some upsets. I mean, didn't Japan surprise the world with their wonderful win against Ireland? And
has there been a bigger moment than that for you so far?
No, that's definitely the moment of this World Cup. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody says, South Africa losing to Japan, one of the biggest in world sport, and it certainly was. I think this is up there. This is an amazing moment for the country, for the players, and the way they played and the way they did it. And then the way they've actually hammered it home in the subsequent games. Haven't they played beautifully?
I tell you what's interesting. Whilst we've had tension-laden games because of the draw, you can't say many teams have hit top strap. New Zealand, maybe. But after that, I'm struggling to think of a side that's really done themselves justice as to what I thought and probably they think they could achieve.
Absolutely, and it's a well-made point. I mean, I think our initial conversation here was, England have done Ireland in these warm-up games. The Ireland we see at the World Cup, will it be a different Ireland? Will they be, hitting their straps? Have they kept a lot in reserve? You know what? Absolutely the same as what we saw at Twickenham.
They're all over the place.
They've been lacklustre. They've looked as if they're sort of headless chickens on attack. Defensively, they've been frail. And I was really hoping that they'd be a side who'd really challenge, make a mark, and be the kind of side who could lie in wait for either South Africa or New Zealand at the quarterfinals and be the team to have the upset of the tournament then. But it looks like now, they're still battling to get out of their pool.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, refereeing has been a big talking point. Not that it's ever far away in rugby union, because of the way the laws are deliberately framed to give referees some discretion, without which they say they'd be blowing up at every conceivable opportunity. We'll chat to you in depth about that in a short second. But we spoke to Jonathan Kaplan, who you know well, and he said the referees need to be coached better. What do you make of that comment and the overall issue?
I mean, everybody needs to be coached better. Everybody needs to improve at everything. So it's a bit of a nothing comment. I mean, I know Jonathan. He's an outstanding referee. He's been, was at the top of his game for a long, long time, and I think he's probably just treading carefully. He's just saying, things could be done to make it better. But we all know that, and the public. I think there's a bit of growing unrest amongst the public, not necessarily with the standard of refereeing, just the high inconsistency level on a game-to-game basis, and we're seeing it because rugby. This is always going to be subjective because any fan-based endeavour is subjective. But, we'll all look in from the outside and say, you and I will disagree about a scrum or a line-out or a tackled area or whatever because there's so many nuances. But we have to collectively get it right so that the fans can have the best possible outcome.
Well, a couple of points. The holy grail of total consistency is impossible. No sport,
Agreed.
Even where the laws or rules are much more prescriptive, ever gets that because human beings are involved, and that's always going to make that. What I think is less forgivable is I can understand officials in the heat of a game taking a particular view because they are influenced by the way the game's going and the moment and so on. It's when it comes to citing and people have been able to sit back, they're not involved in the game, they're disinterested parties, they're able to look at footage again and again and again. And then when you see what you think are fairly bang-on, consistent incidents that are dealt with differently, that's when I have much more of a problem.
I couldn't agree more. I'm going to bring something up here which it might be a little bit controversial. So I learned after playing at international level and captaining at international level that the TMO's language that he used governed a form of communication between the referees that was unsaid. So if a referee had said, let's just say, Bob's tackled Brian, it's high, but I'm comfortable that Brian was standing low in the tackle, okay, it's a penalty. And the TMO then said, let's just have a look at another angle. What he meant was,
you're wrong.
I think that it's a yellow card. I'd like to show you another angle, but have a think about your decision again.
Well, why not say that?
Well, exactly. And my point is what they were doing, and this is where part of what we're talking about has all stemmed, is they're protecting the officials who are there because of the position. Now, World Rugby, they need to protect their staff. I get it.
Yeah, but Bob, I tell you what, everybody knows that it's a difficult job on the field.
Of course.
Everybody knows you can miss something, etc.
Absolutely.
I genuinely do not think anyone says, you said that, it's now shown to be that, you're an idiot, don't ever refer again.
No.
You have much more respect if you say, actually, on reflection, when I've been able to see it again, now you give me another angle, then I'm changing my mind.
Yep.
I don't think anyone thinks that's a problem.
The politicking nature of sport and sports officials is such that what they're trying to do is just maintain a decorum that allows them to be predictable. Now, I think World Rugby do an incredible job of spreading the game, etc. I think they've got this little bit incorrect. I went and did some research on the NFL. It's not an independent body, but they've got independent assessments of every referee after every game. Not general performance, every single decision that they make. Now, in NFL, there are more stop-starts, we know that. But if they can do it for NFL, we could do it for rugby because there would be a collective number or average per game of refereeing decisions that are made. And are we getting feedback? We're saying he's picked up 3 out of 7 forward passes. Has that affected the game? Materially. And I just believe we need to be
What
there.
do they do with that information? Do you know?
The NFL goes straight back. There's a senior commissioner of the relationship between the referees and the league, and then the referees are judged independently by their own body. So the league, you can't have a coach going across them and saying, "Oh, you're treating me badly," or whatever.
And so they can be demoted or
absolutely,
moved around,
fired even. I mean, it's a highly. Last year in a study commission 2018, they got 97.6% of the decisions correct as agreed by all parties.
Wow.
I mean, and
they are helped a little bit by the fact that the laws of American football or rules,
you're
what
right.
they call
No, I'm not trying to change our laws.
More black and white.
Yes, they are. They are. But things like the nuances of a forward pass, if you've got a framework to judge them with, we can get it right.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people talking about, well, it's not a new tackle law. It's a reinstatement of what's always been there. Some of sections of the media, some ex-players even, are saying that they feel things are going in the wrong direction. It could ruin the game. And I saw this widely touted over social media, and I know that that's not the be-all and end-all. You know, after the Argentina game, the fans suffered, it ruined the game. But let me just put my point of view. Players can tackle in any way they want. They're responsible for the height at which they start tackles. If they make a referee make a decision because they've started too high and they get a verdict which they think is wrong and a sanction which they think is wrong, then they can't complain because they could have started lower. And it's not until coaches start telling them, they start telling each other, and it's made in their self-interest to do this, that they will change. Because I heard a proposal to have an orange card where, all right, the guy goes off, but after 20 minutes or 30 minutes, a guy comes on, so it evens it back up. And I just make the point, if you do that, you won't get any reds. Everyone will give oranges.
Of course.
And by the way, it's not until you suffer, and it is bad for the fans, and it does end the contest in a certain aspects, but that's the sort of sanction you need. It's quite, this is not a new initiative. This has been going on now for 12 months, and they're still not learning. And you wonder, what's it going to take? Because it's not just for the good of the game and safety and all sorts of other things. It's to stop potentially lawsuits which would ruin the game. So,
they'd cripple the game. I mean, you've made 3 or 4 points there, all of which I agree with. The players, I count myself as an ex-player with a boy who plays the game, are getting
so do
more,
I.
yeah,
Absolutely.
are getting more and more worried about the effects of the physical contact of rugby. Not necessarily just because it's rugby. There's a side
and
to
not
that.
just concussion either.
No, exactly. Concussion allied with injuries and those kind of things that are happening is making rugby a very, very, very abrasive, difficult game to sell. And World Rugby are very aware of that. And my thing is, it was a great stat. So in at the World Cup that we played in 2007, which was 12 years later than the 1995 World Cup, which had been won in South Africa, that year's under-18 South African schools team were bigger to a man than the men who represented South Africa in 1995. Now, if you just think about that, they're also faster. And just the collision that they're going through, fitter, stronger, more professional, supposedly, and more high-impact games, okay? So there are bigger collisions anyway. If we don't get rid of the head collisions, we're going to be losing players left, right, and centre, and we're going to have these laws. So my thing is, let's make this the World Cup where it stands out for red cards. And if the coaches are smart, they'll make sure the next one is where it stands out for no red cards because they've taught their players properly to tackle low, to interact with the opposition in a way that doesn't endanger the players. I mean, rugby is a game that I love with all my heart, but there are elements of rugby that are seriously dangerous.
Well, I'll just make a few points before we move on. First of all, I reiterate the point. This hasn't been sprung on players.
Not at all. You're right.
It's an ongoing process. They've just reinforced it. I don't know why they've not learnt before now. They learnt with the tackle in the air fairly quickly, and it shows they can do if they want to. Secondly, at this point, if you're the sort of person who believes that rugby is about big boshing, and the game is somehow denuded because of that, go and watch MMA, because rugby from all decades prior to this and today is perfectly exciting, thrilling, and so on, tense, or everything you want, with people tackling in a different manner and not having these high shots.
Absolutely.
Japan have shown to a man you can do it effectively. Individual players in every single team have shown you can tackle effectively and still hard. And the final point I want to make, the purpose for rugby is for a game for everyone to play of all shapes and sizes, which is about running, passing, yes, tackling to a degree, and scoring tries. That's what it's about. It's not about allowing techniques for macho people to come and bosh each other.
Absolutely.
Where is it? What do you gain from that, apart from the small satisfaction that occasionally someone gets mullered? And by the way, even if they get mullered just below level, do you want to see them injured?
No.
Is that what it's all about?
No, it's a great point, and I agree. And in fact, the best games of rugby are where the big physical play. Look at England; they've got a big physical pack, but their best rugby they're playing is where it's forwards and backs combining, and the winger is scoring in the corner, offloading, passing, brilliant.
Now to discuss England, and in particular their win over Argentina. Some people are frustrated, they're not quite clicking, and yet they're averaging over 6 tries a game. Why don't we speak to someone who should know? Mike Tindall, the 2003 World Cup winning centre, is on the line. Hello, Mike.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Not too bad. Another bonus point win. England is averaging just over 6 tries a game, and yet a lot of people, me included actually, have felt that there's more to come. They haven't quite clicked. What did you make of the performance?
What you could say about them is they've been workmanlike, they've got the job done, they look strong, they've been in control, all nice words, but you still haven't come away from a game going, we are definitely in this tournament to win it, we are definitely going, we are the team to beat, which is a place to be, but also a frustrating place for fans, because you want to drag them into that sort of utopia of you actually supporting a team that's going to win. But I think obviously the game might have been spoiled a little bit by the red card in terms of, it took the sting out of Argentina and made it very comfortable for us.
One of the reasons I think that perhaps I don't consider they've played the starting 15 yet, and I suspect, given the fact that both them and France are through, we may not see that until we get to a quarter-final. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I agree. I'm still not entirely sure what his thoughts are. When he brought Ford off and put Farrell on and had Slade, I still like Slade, but I don't think he's been really fully fit. He looked better on the weekend. I'd still like to see Anthony. Personally, would like to see Anthony Watson play fullback. I still don't know whether we know definitely what's going on in the back row. I'll stick with Curry and Underhill. That's where it's a good way to be. But my worry about going into that Argentina game was the fact that with the first we really didn't show anything. So that when we had to ramp it up, there were a lot of mistakes still on the weekend, but I think that's caught all the teams out in terms of how flippy the ball must be out there. I know it's no excuse, but every team seems to be suffering handling errors that wouldn't normally happen. It would just seem that they were just so controlled. They still put a lot of ball behind, even when they were clearly quite dominant. I'd quite like to see them loosen the shackles a little bit, but maybe that's not the way it's going to be in this tournament for them.
Mike, one thing, just it's Bob Skinstad here. Sorry, how are you, mate?
Hello, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Good to chat to you. And you made a point there about the slippery ball. I mean, we saw in some Super Rugby, when we had the Japanese side come into it, that any games in Singapore, Tokyo, we've seen it with some of the Barbars games in Hong Kong. The humidity is such that it creates a much more difficult ball to hang on to. We've seen quite a lot of the 9s and 10s with some aerial assaults. Do you think it's going to play a big factor from quarterfinals on?
Yeah, I think that's sort of set in now. I think the sort of freebie calls off penalties. It seems to be a safe bet. A lot of defences are playing very hard rush defences, so the crossfield kick works against that. Obviously, the Kiwi try jumps to mind against South Africa. I think with that slippery ball and with that potential, you're seeing a lot more box kicking, and those box kicks have got to be for competition. So I think you're right. I think you are going to see it sort of go down that route. Well, you say that, but Japan haven't done that and seem to get a job done. So I'm enjoying watching Japan. They and I suppose Fiji as well. They very rarely kick, but Fiji made so many handling errors in that Uruguay game, which they would never normally do, and they should have walked in about another 6 tries. But I think that is what you're going to see. You are going to see a strong kicking focused game, and then get in the right areas, and then try and play the phases. But I still think there's fortune favours the brave, I'm hoping, and you'll still see people trying to play and offload and get that game going too.
Final question, Mike. Bit of an unfair one in this sense, because it involves predicting what the French will do against England. So I realise I've given you a bit of a hospital pass, but what if anything are you expecting?
Who knows? Look, I hope that you get a great a great French performance come out that really challenges our lads, because I think we need that. I think we need that kickstarters. So the problem is you just can't predict it. You hope that you almost need them to have a great first 10 minutes and really get into this game, maybe have some big hits and really sort of feel like they're taking it to our boys, I think. And then if they can do that, I think we'll be in for a game. And there's been just moments of genius from this French team throughout the pre-season games and then into this World Cup. But then there's just been the typical complete other side of it. And all we can hope for is they get out the right side of bed on Saturday and they come and have a go at us and try and play with that unpredictability, that French that we have seen in bits from this group of players. And I really sort of like the group of players they've got together at the moment. And if we can do that, they could definitely give us a game. And it'd be just nice to see us have to come out. I don't want to say comfort zone because that's sort of disrespectful, but come out of the control element where we know we can take a team and just control them and put them back in the same areas and squeeze them. I'd like to see us have to do a little bit different and maybe have to force us to play a little bit of a different way, which ultimately we will probably have to do further down the tournament in the latter stages. Mike,
going to leave it there, but thanks you very much for joining us. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, guys. Have a good day.
Very quickly, Bob, England. As I said, it's been difficult to judge them because for various reasons the challenges have not been quite what we thought they were going to be. We haven't seen, as far as I'm concerned, the starting 15 or anything close to that. How do you assess how they're going? I mean, on the one hand, they're averaging over 6 tries a game and they're dispatching opponents fairly well, but people are frustrated.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I think people are frustrated for a combination of things. Mike was saying there were still a lot of handling errors, even though we had the space in the second half. In the first half, we had the space, we didn't use it. That's frustrating me as an ex-player. So I'm looking at it saying, if they haven't put their number 115 out, then the rest of the tournament might be in trouble because the guys who are out there are doing the job. Look at Curry and Underhill. With Vunipola, the way they're making a go of this new combination of the 3 members of the back row. You got Courtney Laws on the bench. We know Maro Itoje's been so good, but what a chance for Itoje and Cruz to combine. Now, of course, everybody talks front 5. That's the anchor, but also back 5 because those guys are going to be stealing a ball. They're also the other supporter in the line out when you're jumping at the back. So those are big tactical and strategic parts of a game that Eddie will be saying, I'm really happy with that. A drop ball or a slippery ball in these games, he's not going to worry nearly as much as a frustrated fan who's 2 pints in and he wants to see England dominate Argentina. But I think they've been really good. I do. I think that the Ford Farrell axis, everybody was not sure if that's what was going to happen. Were we going to see more of Slade or maybe Watson in there? Or I like Mike's suggestion of Watson at fullback. I think he's an outstanding player. But when you start having international teams that you don't know where to fit players in, makes a big difference.
Full Contact, in association with Mitsubishi Motors. Everyone's ambitions are different. You can climb to the top, or you could take on uphill battles of a different kind. You can explore for hundreds of miles, or you could begin a bigger journey. You can make time fly, or you could make it stand still. The Mitsubishi SUV range. Drive your ambition.
Well, France have qualified. I wonder, actually, now that England and France have qualified, whether they'll be tempted to pick teams which are not necessarily the starting 15s. Why don't we ask, certainly from a French point of view, someone who might well know, he's a regular contributor to this podcast. I'd say an acquaintance, not perhaps a friend. In other times he might have been a friend. It's Philippe Szentendre, the former French player and head coach. Hello, Philippe.
Hello, Brian.
The win over Tonga, 23-21, in some ways, I would say, a typically French performance, raced into a 17-point lead, looked very good and then made it difficult. Any sign of this inconsistency ending?
To be honest, we don't know anymore. I think we are pleased, and the French team are qualified in the quarterfinal of the World Cup. But we did 40 minutes good against Argentina, and after nothing, we did 15 minutes against America after 1 hour, so we were struggling, and against Tonga, we did okay 15 minutes, and after we switched off completely. So we are happy to be qualified, and now just we're looking forward to the game against England, just to see if the guys can front up and play during 80 minutes.
Philippe, Bob here. Nice to chat to you. I'm just wondering, do you think that they might change the team around against England? Are we going to see more advantage for them post this game than actually pre?
This is a good question, because we don't know if the coach will pick this best 15 against England, or if he rests a few players and just try with them to be fresh for the quarterfinal against Wales. And what it's more we play, more the guys look tired, no fresh, not sharp at all. The first friendly game after the preparation was against Scotland, and the guys was looking sharp, and they look worse and worse. So we don't know. We know also that Guillaume Guirado is a captain of the team, but at the moment he's more on the bench than to start the game. So it's a lot of question about who will start against England next Saturday.
I just want to take up the point about Guirado. I mean, I spoke to Olivier Magna in Waiheke Island in 2011. He was telling me all about the machinations behind the scenes with Lièvremont, the players and so on. It seems that this is happening again, because Midi Olympique this morning is saying that Guirado is no longer the technical staff's captain. On the other hand, he remains the players' captain. Now, how big a story is this? Are we making too much of it, or is it something that's quite important?
Yeah. I read also the Midi Olympique this morning. He looks like Guillaume Guirado, and he will stop the international rugby after this World Cup, and he's a captain players, and he have a lot of charisma, and he's very important in the squad. But he looks like he have some problem of relationship with Fabien Galtier, but this he don't come from now. He come from 18 months ago when Galtier was coach of Toulon and Guillaume Guirado was a captain of Toulon. So I just hope, that Guillaume Guirado will start against England, because I think it's very important about leadership than your captain is in the starting 15, because if not, all the players are quite confused, and it's not a good signal to give to the players and to the supporters.
And given the fact that the signals might be mixed, what would be a good result out of this game against England?
A good result will be that we try to be very consistent during 80 minutes. We don't expect to beat England. I think they didn't have one tough game since the beginning of the group. They won easily the 3 games. We just hope that the French team can compete against England, put more intensity and be consistent during 80 minutes, and just to bring some confidence in the squad to have some hope in the quarterfinal of the World Cup. So I think this is most important. It's how the French team will play. Just also try to keep the ball, to be dangerous. We showed this against Argentina during 40 minutes, so it was a big hope. And since we didn't see anything since the first game of the opening against Argentina.
A final question, Philippe, before you go. Whichever way the results turn out, not an easy path, and nor should it be at this stage of a World Cup, but you're looking at either Australia or Wales, then South Africa or New Zealand, presuming that the results go the right way. Is there anything any combination the French would prefer?
I think, to be honest, I think they will probably prefer play against Wales, because they know Wales, the Welsh team. They show during the Six Nations the last 2 years. One time we beat them, one time we lost against them, but it was very, very close. And I think for this, maybe a few guys quite important in the squad, but looks not fresh. Maybe they will have a rest, or they will be on the bench against England next Saturday, because the problem in French rugby, and don't come from now, but for the last 10 years, we prepare players to play a top 14, or it's 11 months of competition. So we are like 4x4, and international rugby is Formula 1, but we are not a Formula 1, and this is a big problem in our French rugby. We don't do speed in the club. We coach and we train because it's a long competition, and at the moment the international rugby and the top 14 is two different sports.
I've heard that said before, but and you've made that point consistently. We will see, but thank you very much. It's great to speak to you once again, Philippe Szentendre.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye. Philippe,
not sounding too optimistic there. Interesting analogy. Talking about playing Wales, I mean, they've won 1 out of the last 8 games against Wales. So even about coming close, it's I don't know. Whichever way you look at the draw at this time of a competition, you should be facing these sorts of games so that you feel you've earned it. And I suppose in the end.
Oh, absolutely. It goes back to what we said, players that lose pool games haven't won World Cups before, so it's about that critical momentum. I mean, his comment to me was ringing out. He said, we're not expecting to beat England, we're just hoping to sort of shuffle through and get some form of consistency first. That doesn't sound like someone you'd be scared to take on in a quarter-final. But the problem with the French is when they're not supposed to turn up, they do.
Yes. Right, pay attention, and our next guest, pay attention, because these are permutations for Pool A. Japan will win the pool with a win over Scotland, and Ireland will qualify regardless with a win over Samoa. Assuming, and here's an assumption, that Ireland beat Samoa and Scotland beat Russia with a bonus point, Japan will be out if they lose to Scotland via the head-to-head results. If Japan get a losing bonus point against Scotland, the Scots will have to get a winning bonus point to go through, and this would eliminate Ireland. If Ireland beats Samoa without a bonus point, there's a likelihood that 3 teams will finish on 15 points, and then the pool will come down 2 points difference. But, and here's the rider, the Ireland and Samoa game this weekend is perhaps under major threat because it's been reported that there's a typhoon brewing off the South Island, and if the game is cancelled, the match is ruled a 0-0 draw, which will put Scotland through, even if the game goes ahead, and the conditions could make Ireland's attempt to get a bonus point very, very difficult. So, what do you make of that? I'll ask Bob in a minute, because I'll give him an extra time to cogitate that. No time for our next guest, because he's a bright guy, and he will have known all this anyway. Hugo Southwell, the former Scotland fullback, is on the line. Hello, Hugo.
Hi, Brian. How's it going?
It's not straightforward, is it? I mean, from a Scotland point of view, it is in the sense you need 2 bonus point wins, but the rest of the group itself has been so all over the place. How are you feeling about that?
Well, I was going to say, with Scotland's performances of late, they've still got to win against Russia, so otherwise this all goes out the window. Obviously, their focus now is this Russian game on Wednesday. They've made 14 changes as we've seen this morning. It was going to happen. Their focus is now on that Japan game, but they need to keep. We saw what happened in the Ireland game against Russia. They really struggled to sort of get over the line quickly. It's going to be a grind. They're a hard team to beat, a hard team to get 4 tries against, and Scotland have to have that as a focus. But providing that happens, and there is a providing on that because of all the changes that are being made, then it's still there for the taking for Scotland. I think whether Japan have put so much into this World Cup, you sort of feel that if Scotland can perform at a level that we know they can at their 100% best, I still think it's very doable for Scotland. But that is the big if because they've been so inconsistent.
Hugo, Bob here. The Japan game is going to present something different in as much as it will be the final game of all the pool stages. The extra pressure. They will have had a chance now to digest whether they've beaten Russia, and I'm assuming it's a 5-point win for Scotland against Russia. Japan will have had a much longer break. How do they change how they approach this game, knowing that it's an all or nothing? A loss or even a draw there means they're out.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one. I mean, I think all the momentum is with Japan at the moment, and that's where it's difficult. Obviously, home nation, playing in front of, the crowds have been absolutely outstanding. It's been amazing to watch the Japanese public get behind their team, and rightly so. I think for Scotland, I still think they can do it, but I think it's going to be a very difficult task because I think their consistency and their performance levels across the World Cup have been, against Ireland, they were absolutely atrocious. Then they turned up against Samoa. I wonder, and I stand to be corrected, and I hope I'm corrected, that they can perform for another 2 games at the level they know they need to get through. If they can stop, I think the biggest thing for me against the Japanese side, if you stop them at source, if you slow down their ball, obviously they're trying to play quick rugby. When they get quick ball, they're absolutely lethal. If you can stop them at source, I think Scotland will go a long way to winning that game. Whether they can win it by more than 7 points, which is looking likely it's going to need to be, is very difficult to tell.
Well, win it by more than 7 points and hope that Ireland don't pick up the bonus points so that they can take on New Zealand in the quarterfinals. Surely that's the easy path for them.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the last thing on Scotland's mind at the moment. That having made every single quarterfinal in a World Cup, to be under pressure, we'd probably let's be honest, the best side that Scotland have had in a long time. On paper, this is definitely. You can't just sit here and go on paper, this is the best Scotland side we've had. They've got to perform. And ultimately they didn't against Ireland. They did against Samoa. They're back on the horse now, and they just need to keep that going. They can't think about New Zealand, whether they get New Zealand or not in the quarterfinals. That's too distant away. They've just got to make sure they put themselves in a position, come that Japan game, with 20 minutes to go, that they're in the driving seat and they can win by more than 7. And that's what their focus will be. It's very difficult with how they're performing. To actually be confident and sit here and say, yeah, they're definitely going to do it. I'm hopeful they'll do it. But let's see how they perform on Wednesday and that first 40-50 minutes against Japan.
Yeah, because I'll just put this to you, finally, Hugo. I mean, very short turnaround for Scotland. It happens to someone. It just happens to be Scotland this time. But one of the things about Japan, barring the sort of nervous opening salvos of the very first game, which we know can happen, for me, bar New Zealand, their basic skills have been better more consistently than nearly every other team I can think of. The amount of handling errors that they haven't made compared to others, the clinical direction of their rucking, the tackling behind the gain line, the legitimate legal, low tackling and so on, have been absolutely exemplary. And I just wonder, when you look at the 2 teams, where you think Scotland have a particular edge that might make the difference.
As I said to you before, I think Scotland. I think 1-on-1, it's a pretty even match. I think if you look across, in terms of individual flair, I think the wingers for Japan have looked absolutely electric. I think if you give them space, that's going to be an area where Scotland have to play. They're going to have to turn the wingers. They're going to have to play territory against Japan. They don't want to be giving them easy front foot ball in the middle of the pitch. That's one area for me. So the kicking game is going to be absolutely vital. Finn Russell, Stuart Hogg are going to have huge roles to play in that. But I also think with Japan, you have to slow down our ball. So the back row for Scotland is going to be, and I know it sounds obvious, and Bobby will know all about this, but it's one thing that's going to be a huge area that Jamie Ritchie, Blade Thompson, and Magnus Bradbury, because those guys are going to play. They've been rested for Wednesday against Russia. They're going to have a huge role, and I thought they made a difference against Samoa. I think they had that back row combination was really solid and really stifled the Samoan attack. I think that's going to be a huge area for me. Slow down the ball. Their efficiency, Japan, then gets nullified, and it becomes a lot harder. They've got to make things happen out of nothing, and that's where I think they've had it on the plate. They've got their forwards, for me, Japan, which is an area maybe people thought they wouldn't be able to match up with other nations. Their forwards have been absolutely outstanding, and it's created opportunities for the wingers they have. I think Tamura at fly half played well, he's controlled the game well, and they've got some big centres. So they've created an amazing platform. Scotland have to stop and nullify that.
Great to speak to you. We won't have long to find out where we go, but thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, guys.
We'll finish off with South Africa. I haven't really mentioned them. To a certain extent, them and New Zealand have gone their separate ways. The games in the pool have been, givens within reason. Gets a little bit harder. How happy have you been with what you've seen so far?
Well, I think disappointed with the opening game against New Zealand, but more with the result than anything else, because you're playing the number one team in the world. I don't think they started badly. I don't think they finished badly. I think they were in that game. It was a 10-pointer. They've come close. I would say that I took a lot of positives out of their win against Italy. I thought they were much better. They executed what they wanted to do. They made very, very few mistakes, and they put themselves in a position at, I think, 23 or 27, 3 ahead. Italy got a red card, and then the game, I think sort of deconstructed because of that. So it was difficult for both sides, but they continued to play an abrasive upfront forward pattern of carrying the ball and then using the backside wide once they've got the ball. So I think they were good. I think they would find themselves in a positive place against Canada. The Canadians have got abrasive, strong forwards. They haven't been scrumming that well, so South Africa will want to test themselves against that scrum. There are a couple of players in the South African team who haven't had as much game time, so Rassie will be pleased. He can switch in a few players, and he can play a couple more of his combinations and try them out, because I think they would guess that the best chance, they've qualified already. The best chance that they can give the sort of, let's call it the midweek players, is to have a good outing against Canada and then be challenging if they are to be part of the test going forward.
Relatively straightforward on the field. A couple of issues seemingly going on off the field. Makazole and PP so being excluded or not included from post-match celebrations after the win over Italy. What's all this about? South Africa and race politics. How can you can't say those words without the other one being a part of it. Unfortunately, I think there's a bit of a storm in a teacup. There's two separate incidents. A year ago, Makazole Mapimpi was playing on the right wing. Jesse Creel and Andre Esthuizen were playing 12 and 13. In South Africa, even since I was playing and before, when you line up for the anthems, you line up in order. So, the wings will be separated out. It'll be 10 and 11, usual,
and then 12 and 13 will be together. You're a centre partner, etc. So what happened was they basically just were a little bit late for the anthem, came into the setup, and Mapimpi was standing between Esthuizen and Creel. So Esthuizen moved him around to be next to his player. Now what they've done is dragged that out of the archives and said, oh look, the white players are pushing the back player around, they don't want to be next to him. It's got nothing to do with what happened in this game. And in this game, he's come out on social media and he said, listen, we call ourselves, coming off the bench, I had a great chance to start, but coming off the bench, we call ourselves the bomb squad. We want to come in, we want to diffuse any bad situation, we want to create a good finish for the team. We've got a hashtag, we've got a WhatsApp group, we've got we need to help the starting 15 win these games. He said, I realized I'd started, so when the bomb squad are together and they do a guajo dance. It's an amazing thing. It's a heavily cultural indication of what they care about South Africa in the background. It's not his place to be dancing in it, so he stood out of it. Now, someone has gone and tried to measure these two incidents together and said there's a racial problem in this team. I literally think it's absolutely a whole lot of hot air, and I hate it when somebody's looking for attention trying to do something like that.
What about the Edsabeth story? Because that's carrying on. He was accusations of alleged assault and racism. They've not really been put to bed. Why is that carrying on?
I think a little bit the same. Every newspaper in South Africa right now has got the Springboks on it. If there's an incident that hasn't been put to bed, they're going to try and cause as much trouble as they can. I don't know the details of that incident. I know that South Africa is heavily regulated by the Truth and Reconciliation Committee on the one side and then the Human Rights Committee on the other, who will jump in whenever they can. And remember, the media is a great place for them with the proliferation of sharing on social media and the platforms. What better way to cause a ruckus than on media? So I feel that whatever the outcome there, it has to be sorted out, absolutely. I'm not sure that it has to be sorted out right in the middle of a Rugby World Cup while the national team is on duty.
Quarter-final opponents, one of three. Who do you think is likely? Do you care?
Well, I do care, actually, and I've got such a great affiliation with Scottish rugby. I made my debut there, and I love everything that they stand for. At the moment, I think that just the way they've played, how they've been hosting everybody and what they've done for World Rugby, I would love to play Japan in the quarterfinals. I think it would be a big challenge. If there was going to be another upset, we're the team that they could do it against. They might have that kind of belief. But I would imagine that would be an absolute cracker of an occasion.
It would be an enormous disappointment for them, and I think nearly every other neutral, if they were to win 3 again and not get out of a group.
Well, exactly, and for that reason, adding to sort of my case, I want them to get through, and I'm happy to play against them.
Well, that's all we have time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact in association with the Telegraph and Mitsubishi Motors. I hope you got chapter and verse on the permutations on who might or might not come out of the Scotland, Ireland and Japan group. It's very straightforward. No, it's not. Thank you very much to my co-host Bob Skinstad and to all our guests, of course. We'll be back next Monday when we will know the lineup for all 4 quarter-final matches, so make sure you tune in. In the meantime, why not subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss an episode during the Rugby World Cup and beyond. Whilst you're there, why don't you write a review too? And for now, goodbye.
Full Contact, in association with Mitsubishi Motors. Drive your ambition.